Long before British flags appeared across northern Nigeria, the Sokoto Caliphate stood as one of Africa's greatest Islamic civilizations. Founded in 1804 by the revered Islamic reformer Usman Dan Fodio, the Caliphate stretched across vast territories of West Africa. Its influence reached modern-day Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, and beyond. Its cities thrived with Quranic scholarship, trans-Saharan trade, and military strength. Sokoto itself became a beacon of Islamic learning, attracting clerics and students from across the Sahel. But while the Caliphate expanded spiritually and politically, another empire was rising across the seas. The British Empire. And soon, these two worlds would collide. By the late 19th century, Europe had begun violently dividing Africa among itself. Britain sought control over northern Nigeria for trade, political influence, and strategic domination of the Niger River. Under the leadership of Frederick Lugard, British forces advanced steadily northward. Their weapons were modern. Their mission was conquest. As British troops subdued smaller kingdoms and emirates, the Sokoto Caliphate watched cautiously. War was coming. In 1903, British troops marched toward Sokoto. The Caliphate's armies fought bravely with cavalry, swords, and old rifles, but they were no match for Maxim machine guns and modern artillery. Village after village fell. Then came the fall of Kano. And finally, Sokoto itself. The capital of the Caliphate was captured. The unthinkable had happened. One of Africa's greatest Islamic empires had fallen to colonial power. Sultan Muhammadu Attahiru I refused to surrender. Rather than submit to British rule, he fled eastward with loyal followers, declaring continued jihad against the invaders. Families abandoned their homes to follow him. Warriors rode beside clerics. Entire communities joined the migration. It became both an escape and a resistance movement. But British forces pursued relentlessly. Months later, the Sultan was cornered at Burmi. The battle was brutal. When it ended, Attahiru I was dead. The British believed resistance had ended forever. They were mistaken. After conquering Sokoto, the British introduced indirect rule. Traditional emirs were retained, but only under colonial supervision. Muhammadu Attahiru II was installed as Sultan. To British administrators, it was an efficient system. To many locals, it was betrayal. Taxes increased. Colonial laws spread. Foreign control became visible everywhere. Across villages and towns, anger quietly brewed. Southwest of Sokoto lay a quiet settlement called Satiru. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. But beneath the silence, revolutionary ideas were spreading. Religious clerics preached that colonial rule was evil. They condemned local leaders cooperating with the British. Many villagers believed the end times were near. And they believed God would soon send divine deliverance. Satiru was becoming a powder keg. The teachings of Mahdism had already shaken Sudan decades earlier. Now the ideology reached northern Nigeria. A charismatic religious leader in Satiru declared himself the Mahdi, the divinely guided redeemer in Islamic prophecy. His followers believed British bullets could not kill true believers. Some even believed angels would descend to fight beside them. Faith transformed into militancy. And militancy transformed into rebellion. The movement spread rapidly. Peasants joined. Former slaves joined. Disillusioned warriors joined. Clerics preached revolution in hidden gatherings. Young men sharpened swords and spears. Women prepared food and supplies. The village transformed into a resistance camp. Satiru was preparing for holy war. British officials heard disturbing reports about Satiru. At first, they dismissed the rumors. Then colonial messengers sent into the village disappeared. Soon afterward, British district officers investigating the unrest were ambushed and killed. The empire was stunned. A tiny village had openly challenged British authority. Worse still, the rebels captured weapons from colonial forces. News spread rapidly across northern Nigeria. Fear gripped the British administration. British officials heard disturbing reports about Satiru. At first, they dismissed the rumors. Then colonial messengers sent into the village disappeared. Soon afterward, British district officers investigating the unrest were ambushed and killed. The empire was stunned. A tiny village had openly challenged British authority. Worse still, the rebels captured weapons from colonial forces. News spread rapidly across northern Nigeria. Fear gripped the British administration. Colonial officers feared the uprising could inspire mass rebellion throughout the former caliphate. British intelligence reports warned that thousands might join the movement. The memory of the Sudanese Mahdist wars haunted colonial officials. Immediate military action was ordered. The rebellion had to be crushed quickly. At any cost, the British demanded support from Sultan Adahira II. The decision was agonizing. Support the rebels and risk total destruction. Or support the British and preserve the throne. The Sultan chose survival. Troops loyal to Sokoto joined British-led forces against Satiru. For many rebels, this was the ultimate betrayal. Muslims would now fight fellow Muslims on behalf of empire. British columns advanced toward the village. African soldiers of the Royal West African Frontier Force marched beside British officers. They carried rifles, artillery, and deadly Maxim machine guns. Meanwhile, inside Satiru, prayers echoed through the night. Warriors prepared for martyrdom. No one expected mercy. As darkness covered Satiru, the rebels gathered for final prayers. Some recited verses from the Quran. Others sharpened blades in silence. Parents embraced children. Young warriors swore oaths of resistance. They knew the British possessed overwhelming firepower. But surrender was impossible. To them, death in battle was preferable to life under colonial rule. At dawn, British guns opened fire. Explosions ripped through the village. Homes collapsed. Smoke consumed the sky. Then the rebels charged. Hundreds of men rushed toward machine guns with swords and spears. The battlefield descended into chaos. Bodies fell everywhere. But still they advanced. The British soldiers were stunned by their fearlessness. Machine guns tore through wave after wave of fighters. The rebels fought desperately, some reaching British positions before being shot down. Women and children fled burning compounds. The village became a sea of blood and fire. By the end of the battle, hundreds, perhaps thousands, lay dead. Satiru had been crushed. But the resistance had terrified the empire. After the battle, British forces burned Satiru to the ground. Homes were destroyed. Food supplies seized. Survivors scattered into surrounding territories. Colonial authorities wanted to erase the rebellion completely. They intended Satiru to become a warning. A lesson against resistance. Despite victory, the uprising deeply unsettled British officials. They realized conquest alone was not enough. The people remained spiritually resistant. Reports warned that religious movements could ignite future rebellions across northern Nigeria. The British responded with tighter surveillance and stricter political control. The empire had won the battle. But not the hearts of the people. For decades, the story of Satiru faded from public memory. Colonial records labeled the rebels as fanatics. But among local communities, their courage survived in oral tradition. They were remembered not as extremists, but as defenders of dignity. Men who stood against empire despite impossible odds. The Satiru Uprising became one of the earliest anti-colonial resistance wars in Nigeria. Its spirit would later echo in nationalist struggles across Africa. From Kenya to Algeria. From Ghana to Angola. Africans continued resisting colonial domination. Satiru became part of a much larger story. The story of Africa refusing to surrender. Today, little remains of the village that once challenged the British Empire. But history still remembers. It remembers the warriors who charged machine guns with swords. It remembers the clerics who preached freedom. It remembers the ordinary villagers who chose resistance over submission. The Sokoto Uprising of 1906 was crushed militarily. But spiritually, its fire never died. And across Africa, the echoes of Satiru still whisper a timeless message. Empires may conquer land, but they can never fully conquer the human spirit.